The frigid March morning of 2020 began with an unusual disturbance on South Sheridan Street in Tacoma, Washington. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a 2-story beige house in a quiet residential neighborhood. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as tactical-clad officers fanned out across the yard, covering the back escape routes. Inside, 46-year-old Ryan Springman, an electrical maintenance technician, was pouring coffee into an old porcelain mug, a habit he had kept for years while working in public utilities. At exactly 6:02 a.m., the knocking came fast and hard. Ryan Springman, King County Sheriff's Office. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 2008 disappearance of the Harbor Yogurt employees." The officers later described how the man's hand froze mid-air, coffee spilling across the table, yet his eyes remained unnervingly calm, as if he had been hearing those words inside his head for the past 12 years, just waiting for the day they would finally be spoken aloud. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the latest cases. December 2008. Tacoma, a small suburb south of Seattle, was drenched in the cold, damp rain and wind typical of a Washington winter. Night had fallen early. Streetlights cast a pale yellow glow onto the wet asphalt, reflecting in shaky, blurred streaks. South Center Mall was nearing closing time. Most stores had already turned off their lights. Only a few fast food counters and coffee shops remained lit. In the southern corner of the complex, Harbor Yogurt was one of the smallest shops, its pale neon green sign casting a faint glow onto the tiled walkway. Inside, 4 young women, Allison Merrick, Rachel Sloan, Hannah Bryce, and Emily Carter, were working the last evening shift of the week. They were high school and college friends who worked part-time at the shop and knew the closing routine so well they could do it without looking at the checklist. The metallic clink of spoons against glass cups, mixed with the low music playing from the radio. The atmosphere was quiet, filled only with the sweet smell of yogurt and the steady patter of rain on the awning outside. Allison was closing out the register, Rachel was gathering cleaning rags, and Hannah and Emily were tidying the back kitchen. An employee from the bookstore across the hall walked past just before pulling down the metal gate, the last person to see them. At that moment, the 4 girls were still chatting, the shop lights bright, reflecting off the fogged glass. After that, the corridor gradually emptied. Neighboring stores turned off their lights, and only Harbor Yogurt remained illuminated in the empty space. After closing time, the entire mall fell silent. The rain grew heavier, wind whistling through the gaps in the parking lot, carrying a low rustling sound. The shop lights stayed on, but no one else appeared. When the clock passed 10 p.m., Allison's father pulled up as usual to pick up his daughter. He saw the lights still on inside, the glass door slightly ajar, the sign still glowing. Inside it was dimly lit, and no one answered when he called out. The door was not fully locked, yet there were no signs of forced entry. He stepped inside, calling his daughter's name into the cold emptiness, hearing only the low hum of the air conditioning. The plastic chairs were neatly pushed in, the counter spotless, as if just cleaned. He called Allison's cell, then each of the other girls, all rang unanswered. Cold wind blew in through the open door, mixing the damp outdoor air with the lingering yogurt scent, and suddenly making it hard for him to breathe. As the other families arrived, one by one, they exchanged anxious glances. They waited a few more minutes, hoping the girls had just stepped out nearby. But time passed with no one returning. Initial worry quickly turned to fear. In the middle of the rainy night, they gathered at the mall entrance, spoke briefly, then decided to call the police. Hannah's mother, hands shaking, dialed the King County Sheriff's Office, her voice breaking as she reported that 4 young women had vanished from the store where they worked. At the other end of the line, the duty officer typed steadily, recording every detail amid the sound of rain hammering on the station's metal roof. The report was confirmed. South Center Mall, 4 Harbor Yogurt employees missing after their shift. Lights still on, door unlocked. Less than 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars left the station, their lights reflecting off the slick, wet pavement. When they arrived, a light rain was still falling. The parking lot nearly deserted, except for a few employee cars and the parents' vehicles with headlights on, waiting in vain. The faint glow from the Harbor Yogurt sign shone down onto puddles, forming a pale halo in the cold, damp air. The first officer stepped out, scanned the area, and immediately ordered the scene preserved. He opened his notebook, noted the time of arrival, then gently pushed open the glass door. Inside, the cold yogurt smell mixed with the ozone scent from the freezers created a chilling, empty feeling. The counter was clean, plastic chairs neatly arranged, cash register closed, everything eerily normal. No signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no strange footprints on the floor. The officers called each girl's name, but only the rain outside answered. They checked behind the counter, the storage room, the restroom, all empty. An officer signaled the families to wait in the corridor and keep their distance to avoid contaminating the scene. Allison's father tried to stay calm while providing the last known contact time with his daughter. Rachel's mother kept asking, could they have just gone to buy something and come right back? The officer did not answer, only quietly took notes. The mall security guard was called in and confirmed that when he left the area around 10 p.m., the shop lights were still on. Initial checks showed the mall's alarm system recorded no activations, meaning no break-in. A quick on-site report was filed and sent to headquarters. No signs of intrusion, property intact. 4 employees missing for unknown reasons. After sweeping the surrounding area, patrol units confirmed no suspicious vehicles parked nearby and no unusual activity on the main corridor cameras. By nearly 1 a.m., the wind had grown colder and the rain still had not let up. The officer in charge recommended contacting the Criminal Investigations Division to take over and preserving the shop exactly as is until the forensics team arrived the next morning. Headquarters received the report and that same night opened case file Buttaboué 1228, classified as unusual group disappearance. On the internal electronic system, the 4 girls' names were entered into the missing persons database along with physical descriptions and the note last known location undetermined. Around the same time, an internal call was transferred to the office of Lieutenant Thomas Hensley, a veteran investigator who handled complex missing persons cases in the county. He took the information, requested all preliminary data, and ordered the Harbor Yogurt area sealed to prevent unauthorized entry overnight. As he left home for headquarters, strong wind made the flag in front of the sheriff's office flap wildly in the rain. On his desk, the first fax from the scene had already printed the 4 employees' identities, time of disappearance, shop condition, and the temporary note, no obvious signs of criminal activity. Hensley read slowly, his eyes lingering longer than usual on that phrase. He set the papers down, opened his notebook, and wrote a single line, "If there are no traces of leaving, we have to find why they vanished." Outside, rain mixed with mist streaked across his office window. The night passed in silence, but the Tukwila disappearance had only just begun to take shape. The next morning, with gray clouds still hanging low over King County, the forensics team was dispatched to South Center Mall under Lieutenant Hensley's direct orders. The entire corridor leading to Harbor Yogurt was cordoned off with police tape, and mall security stood guard at both ends. Technicians in protective suits, gloves, and booties began documenting every detail inside the shop. Bright portable lights shone onto the cold tile floor, illuminating lingering watermarks from the previous night's rain. One technician examined the front glass door, hinges undamaged, lock unpicked. The door had been left ajar, easily pushed open by hand, and fingerprints on the handle were mostly from staff. Inside, the counter was tidy. Appliances still running normally, the digital clock frozen at 10:06 p.m., matching the mall's recorded brief power outage. The lighting system showed no short circuits. The control panel had been left in manual mode. Hensley walked the space, noting the arrangement: plastic chairs pushed in, trash emptied, refrigerators securely closed, no spilled drinks or dropped items. The cash register was intact. The last transaction a small sale just before closing, with no evidence it had been opened afterward. One technician measured a faint mud smear near the rear service door. An indistinct shoe print, possibly staff, but still photographed and catalogued. The entire back area, storage and restroom were scanned for fibers, hair or foreign fluids. Nothing unusual. The shop's temperature had remained low overnight due to the constantly running AC, drying any moisture traces from surfaces. The scene report stated clearly: no signs of struggle, everything tidy, register intact, no clear evidence of criminal activity. However, the unlocked door and lights left on suggested someone had left hurriedly or under unusual circumstances. Hensley ordered the search expanded to the corridor, parking lot, and rear service corridors, where electrical conduits and cooling systems were located. He noted in his book, if no crime occurred inside the shop, the path of movement must lie outside this area. When the examination ended, the entire shop was sealed with police tape and a guard posted. The preliminary report reached King County headquarters that afternoon, concluding the scene was undisturbed, insufficient evidence to confirm criminal activity, but recommending expansion of the search outside the mall to clarify the reason for the disappearance of Harbor Yogurt's 4 employees. Immediately after forensics completed their work, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley requested a large-scale search operation across the entire Tukwila area. Within hours, police, rescue teams, and dozens of volunteers were mobilized and divided into groups that fanned out around South Center Mall. Maps were spread across a patrol car hood, areas marked in red: east parking lot, abandoned warehouses, service corridors running parallel to underground power lines, and the Green River bank more than a mile away. The sky remained overcast, low clouds and intermittent rain making the search difficult. Each team carried high-powered flashlights, thermal detectors, drones with infrared cameras, and 2 K9 unit dogs. Hensley personally joined the main team, sweeping the rear parking lot, where a security guard had reported seeing a white van the previous night. Mud covered the asphalt, old tire tracks blended with dozens of footprints, erasing nearly all original traces. Meanwhile, volunteer teams walked the riverbank, dragging grappling hooks along the water's edge, while rescue units checked drainage ditches and nearby vacant lots. Drones flew low over the industrial area behind the mall, looking for disturbed soil or suspicious signs, but the feeds showed only concrete and moss-covered metal roofs. On the second day, when the rain briefly stopped, a search team on the western edge of the mall found a small dark fabric scrap caught on a rusty chain-link fence. It was stained with industrial oil and fine dust, the edge frayed from the wind. Hensley arrived immediately, ordering the evidence collected and sealed per protocol. The fabric was placed in an evidence bag labeled #WA 1222804A with exact GPS coordinates. The surrounding area was photographed and distances measured, approximately 180 meters in a straight line from Harbor Yogurt's rear service door. Beyond this scrap, no further signs of movement, personal items, or evidence were found. The K9 units tracked the scent along the fence, but lost the trail near an abandoned lot behind the mall. That afternoon, Hensley held a quick briefing at the scene. Results were compiled. The entire 2-mile radius from the mall had been searched with no bodies, vehicles, or suspect traces found. He noted the original scene was too clean and natural traces, mostly washed away by rain. By the end of the third day, the official search was terminated. Caution tape was removed. Volunteers went home, and only a few patrol cars remained on watch. The final report sent to King County headquarters stated, "No signs of movement detected, no personal items recovered. Industrial fabric scrap is the sole piece of evidence." Hensley signed off and ordered the items sent to the Tacoma lab for analysis. The report closed with a brief comment, "Expanded search yielded no results." Recommend shifting the case to in-depth investigation. With the search concluded and no results, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley focused on reviewing the entire South Center Mall security system, treating it as the first step to reconstructing an exact timeline of the disappearance night. Mall management turned over all surveillance footage from more than 40 cameras covering entrances, corridors, and service areas. The hard drives were sealed and transferred to the forensics lab for extraction, and neighboring stores were also asked to provide copies of their own camera data for the same time frame. Hensley and the video technician spent hours in the review room, scrubbing through footage frame by frame. They confirmed the 4 girls were still inside the shop near closing time, cleaning, talking, then moving behind the counter. A neighboring employee walked past at 9:54 p.m. After that, the corridor gradually emptied. At 10:03 p.m., the main mall camera feed cut out abruptly. The screen went to static and lost signal for exactly 5 minutes before restoring. During that gap, no other camera in the system captured the 4 girls leaving the shop or any movement in the corridor outside. When the technicians checked the system logs, they discovered the mall's breaker had been manually switched off during the outage and turned back on at 10:08 p.m. All cameras resumed normally afterward, with no burnt circuits or equipment damage. Notably, the mall alarm system, programmed to trigger on power loss, recorded no alert at that time. Electronic logs showed the alarm had been manually disabled from the technical control panel at the same moment power was cut. Hensley ordered access logs for the technical room on the night of December 14th, cross-referenced with on-duty personnel. The log showed a single card swipe into the electrical room at 9:57 p.m. under IDR SPR-04, belonging to Ryan Springman, the electrical maintenance technician responsible for lighting and backup power systems. Data showed Springman logged out of the system at 10:09 p.m. right after power was restored. Technicians confirmed there were no system errors, all actions followed proper administrative procedure, and no one else had access to the technical area at that time. Hensley wrote in his notebook, 5-minute blackout. Alarm manually disabled, only person in the electrical room, Springman. The compiled report sent to investigations concluded the power outage was not accidental, but a deliberate act by an authorized technician. Though motive remained unclear, this was the final timeline marker that aligned perfectly with the disappearance of the Harbor Yogurt employees. After the security system analysis revealed anomalies during the power outage period, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley organized a series of interviews to cross-check the statements of individuals present or working near the mall's central area on the night of December 14th. In a temporary conference room at South Center Mall, he sequentially recorded the testimonies of security guards, cleaning staff, and delivery personnel. One guard named Mark Ellison, who was on the night shift that evening, stated that he had completed his patrol of the South Corridor around 9:45 p.m. and upon returning to the logistics parking area, noticed a white van parked right up against the technical zone, with the cab lights still on but no one inside. He didn't pay much attention, assuming it belonged to the maintenance crew, who often worked late on weekends to check the electrical systems. When asked for the exact time, Ellison recalled that just as he was leaving the area, all the lights in the main corridor flickered once and then went out completely, coming back on a few minutes later. This statement matched the camera footage and the recorded power outage time in the technical logs. Hensley requested verification of the van. A check with mall management revealed that the shopping complex had 3 white vehicles used for technical purposes, all registered to Northwest Facility Maintenance, the long-term contracted maintenance company for the mall. The company's night shift employee list showed only one person assigned to South Center Mall that night, Ryan Springman, the technician responsible for electrical and lighting systems. When summoned to the King County office for questioning, Springman arrived in his work overalls, calm but guarded. He stated that he had been at the mall from around 8 p.m. to inspect auxiliary breakers and emergency lighting as part of routine scheduled maintenance, and that he left before 10 p.m. because everything was functioning normally. When Hensley asked whether he had encountered anyone from Harbor Yogurt during his shift, Springman replied that he only saw a few stores still open and denied entering the south wing where that shop was located. However, the access card data Hensley already had told a different story. Springman's card was scanned at the technical gate at 9:57 p.m. He logged into the electrical system and only logged out at 10:09 p.m., nearly 10 minutes later than he claimed. Moreover, there was no record of him exiting the mall premises before 10:20 p.m., as he had stated. When asked about the van, Springman insisted he had parked it in the rear technical area, near the generator, and that he didn't remember the exact departure time because he had to pack up his tools. Hensley recorded the entire statement, clearly noting the contradictions between the verbal account and the card data. That same day, he also interviewed the cleaning crew, 2 workers, who finished their shift at 10:30 p.m. Both confirmed seeing the corridor lights flicker and go out briefly, but heard no noises or screams. The last delivery driver, who had left an hour earlier, noticed nothing unusual. In summary, only guard Ellison's statement perfectly matched both the power outage timing and the appearance of the white van, the first piece of information directly linking events to the technical area. Hensley wrapped up the final interview late that night. A clearer timeline, now forming in his mind. The Harbor Yogurt employees vanished between 10 o'clock and 10:05 p.m., coinciding exactly with the moment the electrical system was manually shut off, and the only person with authorized access to that area was Ryan Springman. After completing witness interviews and collecting security system data, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley sent all physical evidence recovered during searches and crime scene surveys to the Tacoma Forensic Laboratory for detailed analysis. The evidence inventory included a dark fabric scrap stained with industrial oil found on the rear perimeter fence, 3 hairs recovered from the technical area near the emergency exit, 2 faint shoe prints on the tile floor, and several small samples containing dried oil residue taken from the passageway behind Harbor Yogurt. Each item was numbered, sealed, and annotated with the exact time of collection, precise location, and the officer who collected it. Hensley was present at the lab on December 17th to oversee the analysis process. Technicians separated the samples, cleaned them, and examined them under an electron microscope to identify fiber types, oil origins, and to extract DNA from the hairs and any remaining epithelial cells. Among the submitted samples, only 1 hair, approximately 3 centimeters long, and still attached to its root sheath, was intact enough for genetic profiling. Results received 3 days later showed a complete DNA match with the archived profile of Hannah Briss, one of the 4 missing employees. This discovery confirmed she had been in the rear technical area after the shop closed. The other 3 hairs were broken and yielded incomplete genetic sequences, but shared similar pigmentation and structure, making it highly likely they belonged to the same group. The fabric samples were identified as polyester cotton blend, closely matching the color of Harbor Yogurt employee uniforms, and were stained with industrial oil containing compounds identical to the lubricants used in the mall's electrical systems and refrigeration units. The shoe prints collected from the corridor floor were size 7, a common women's athletic sole pattern, but the tread was blurred from sliding and not clear enough for direct comparison. Additionally, 2 dried oil streaks in the technical area contained hydrocarbon concentrations matching the oil used in the backup generator, an area under the maintenance department's jurisdiction. Forensic examiners screened for male DNA on all samples, but every test came back negative. No foreign genetic profiles were found in Washington State's CODIS database. This result ruled out third-party involvement at the examined scene, at least based on biological evidence. When the official report was returned to the King County office, Hensley read every line carefully, margin noting, "Traces confirm Hannah Brice's presence in the technical area, but do not indicate the cause of disappearance." In the overall conclusion section, the lab stated, "The collected samples show no signs of direct violence, no blood, no male DNA, no evidence of a struggle. However, the presence of industrial oil and technical materials indicates the victims were near or inside the maintenance area prior to disappearance." An accident or intentional evidence tampering cannot be ruled out. Hensley requested full backups of all test results, had the samples repackaged for long-term storage in the county evidence vault, and noted in his logbook that this was the first evidence confirming the girls had moved outside the shop's perimeter. That same evening, as he left the lab, rain began to fall again, reflecting the red glow of traffic lights on the wet pavement, and only one question circled in his mind: what made 4 employees leave their store and enter the technical area, a place they were never allowed to go? After receiving the Tacoma forensic report confirming Hannah Bryce's DNA, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley shifted the investigation's focus to vehicles present around South Center Mall on the night of the incident. Based on guard Mark Ellison's statement about a white van parked in the logistics area at the exact time of the disappearances, he requested the mall's administrative department to provide a complete list of registered vehicles operating that night. Records showed 4 white vans had entered or exited the technical zone between 8 p.m. and midnight, but only one belonged to Northwest Facility Maintenance, Ryan Springman's employer. The license plate was 7B4296, registered to the company, with Springman listed as the assigned driver for the night shift. Hensley and 2 officers went to the company's yard in Renton to inspect the vehicle. When they arrived, the van was parked inside the garage, looking freshly clean despite continuous muddy rain in recent days. Hensley ordered the cargo area opened and a formal inspection report drafted. Inside, the metal floor had been scrubbed thoroughly. No dust, no scraps of paper, no personal items. A strong chemical cleaning odor hit them, sharp and cold, like chlorine mixed with industrial solvent. Technicians scanned every surface with ultraviolet light, but found no blood or organic fluorescence. Beneath the rubber floor mat, they located only a small scratch showing signs of metal brush scrubbing. When questioned, Springman explained that he had washed the van the previous morning to keep tools sanitary. However, the company's maintenance schedule showed no requirement for midweek vehicle cleaning. Police collected air samples and several cleaning rags for chemical testing, then sealed them in specialized bags and sent them to the lab. Hensley observed Springman standing with arms crossed, outwardly calm, but with eyes repeatedly flicking toward the van. When asked if anyone else ever used the vehicle, Springman answered firmly, "I'm the only one with the keys." Other employees confirmed this was true. As the regular night technician, Springman took the van home and returned it each morning. The yard's entry-exit log showed the vehicle was returned at 1:12 a.m. on December 15th, just a few hours after the mall power outage, a time that contradicted his earlier claim of leaving work before 10 p.m. Hensley ordered photographs of the entire vehicle, interior and undercarriage, and noted the odometer reading. Mileage had increased by more than 40 miles beyond the company's routine patrol report, with no corresponding entry in the maintenance log approving that trip. When asked about the discrepancy, Springman replied, "I might have driven to the auxiliary warehouse for supplies." Hensley made no comment, simply had him sign the inspection acknowledgement. Before leaving, he ordered the van temporarily sealed for 48 hours pending chemical test results. In his memo back to the office, he wrote, "Suspect vehicle cleaned to an unusual degree, strong solvent odor. Driver's behavior suggests consciousness of evidence removal. No direct physical evidence, but multiple contradictions in timing and travel." At the end of the report, he added a private pencil note, "Springman requires long-term surveillance. If he's not lying, he is at minimum concealing something." In the months that followed, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley persistently re-examined every remaining scrap from the South Center Mall disappearance scene. He submitted additional test requests, hoping some tiny overlooked detail might open a new investigative path. However, results from the Tacoma lab remained essentially unchanged. All samples from the van, technical area, and rear fence were negative for biological traces or unusual chemicals. The faint shoe prints were too blurred for tracing. Remaining fabric only confirmed origin from Harbor Yogurt uniforms, and no additional DNA beyond Hannah Bryce's previously identified sample. The final report stated coldly that no clear criminal indicators were detected, insufficient basis for continued in-depth analysis. Meanwhile, Hensley and his team re-interviewed everyone present at the mall on the night of December 14th, but statements either repeated earlier accounts or contradicted one another. One cleaner claimed to have seen strange light in the south corridor around 10 p.m., yet cameras recorded nothing. A customer reported hearing a loud noise from the technical area, but he had left an hour before the power failure. No witness was reliable enough to formalize. Hensley expanded checks to adjacent industrial zones, private parking lots, and emergency exits leading to the highway, all to no avail. After 4 months, the volume of collected data was overwhelming, yet yielded no logical connections. Springman's file remained flagged as person of interest, monitor, but covert surveillance produced nothing. He arrived at work on time, lived normally, never left Washington state, and made no changes to residence or vehicle. The prosecutor's office determined there was insufficient evidence for search or arrest warrants, forcing Hensley to suspend all coercive measures. Media pressure gradually eased as the case stalled, and the victims' names appeared only in short local news blurbs. Within the department, the disappearance was classified as lacking definitive criminal elements. By early June 2009, Hensley submitted his summary report for the initial investigation phase. No new evidence, no credible witnesses, current leads unproductive. The report was approved, and case WA 1228 was officially reclassified as an unresolved missing persons file. Per procedure, all physical evidence, interview transcripts, camera data copies, and forensic reports were sealed and transferred to the King County Cold Case Unit. On the afternoon of the handoff, Hensley was present in the evidence vault, personally verifying each envelope and seal signature. He placed the nearly 300-page file into a metal box, labeled WA 1228, Tacoma, December 2008, then signed the official transfer form. The box was stored in Evidence Room 3 in Renton, in a climate and humidity-controlled section, to preserve DNA long-term. Annually, per Cold Case Unit regulations, unresolved files are inventoried during the final quarter. New technicians on rotation typically know the case only by the faded silver label, Tacoma, December 2008, third row, shelf 27. Inside the vault, pale fluorescent lights reflect off rows of identical metal boxes, silent like the rest of the unfinished stories. From 2010 to 2014, the case was barely mentioned outside routine administrative reports. Most original investigators had transferred or retired. Thomas Hensley, the former lead, left the force in 2012, but continued emailing the Cold Case Unit whenever new forensic technology emerged. In a 2013 message he wrote, "If any method exists to analyze degraded DNA, retest Hannah Breese's hair." At the time, technology was still limited. Re-examination of old DNA samples frequently failed due to storage duration and cellular degradation. The Cold Case Unit maintained its schedule. Every 6 months a technician checked seals, measured temperature and humidity, and logged evidence condition. In 2015, when YSTAR DNA technology became widely available in crime labs, a statewide Washington review identified cases eligible for retesting. King County's internal report listed W1228 as eligible for YSTAR testing, pending review, because the hair and fabric samples remained intact. A new sticker was added to the box. However, without new physical discoveries or legal impetus, the case was never prioritized. Cold case managers, working with limited resources, favored cases showing violence or confirmed male DNA. The Harbor Yogurt incident remained classified as missing persons, no criminal indicators, failing to meet reactivation criteria. During that period, the unit still received occasional anonymous tips or calls from locals, mostly speculation or confusion with other Seattle area disappearances. All were logged, cross-checked, and ultimately deemed unrelated. A digital copy of W1228 existed in the county's archive system, last updated in September 2016, when technicians added notes about YSTAR capability. In the comments field, the data entry tech wrote a single line, "Evidence intact, no basis for reopening." From then until 2018, the case sank nearly into oblivion. The press no longer mentioned the four women, and their families had stopped contacting police after years of silence. On the cold case unit's storage shelf, box W1228 sat in the same spot, its silver label gradually fading, fine dust collecting along the lid edges. Whenever a technician passed by, they would pause for a moment, glance at the words, "Unresolved Missing Persons, Tukwila, December 2008, then move on. In the storage department's year-end 2018 internal notes, the file status remained unchanged. No action to reopen, no new developments. And for the King County Administrative System, disappearance W1228 remained simply one case number asleep, among thousands of others still awaiting answers. In early 2020, when the expansion project for the new commercial area in Tukwila broke ground on the former site of South Center Mall, traces of the past that seemed forever buried beneath thick layers of concrete unexpectedly resurfaced. On a morning in early February, a crew from the contractor Westpac Development was excavating the foundation for an underground parking garage when their drill hit an unusual hard object that was offset from the original structural plans of the building. Thinking it was an old drainage pipe, they stopped the machine and tapped it lightly with a hydraulic hammer, discovering it was hollow inside. When they cut open the section of pipe, they found one end sealed with concrete mixed with gravel chips, nothing like any construction technique used in the original project. One of the workers took photos and sent them to the site supervisor. Recognizing that the structure might be a remnant of the mall's old technical systems, the supervisor decided to notify local authorities before continuing excavation. Tukwila police arrived on scene along with building department representatives, immediately cordoned off the area, and contacted the King County office to verify records related to that location. When the forensics team opened the pipe, they discovered inside a rusted metal box about the size of a document case, placed deep within the concrete tube. The box was carefully removed, sealed, and transferred to the crime scene analysis lab. When it was opened, it contained 4 Old Harbor Yogurt employee badges, each bearing the name of one of the 4 girls who disappeared in 2008. Allison Merrick, Rachel Sloan, Hannah Brees, and Emily Carter. Tucked between the badges was a yellowed slip of paper with handwriting in black ink, "Lockup 1005. The short, evenly written note had slightly bled ink, and the corner of the paper was stained with cement dust. There was nothing else in the box except a few rust streaks and dried concrete residue. When technicians sent the paper for analysis, they discovered a faint fingerprint on the right edge. After running it through the automated identification system, the print matched the biometric records of Ryan Springman, a former maintenance technician at the mall. This discovery was immediately reported to the King County Sheriff's Office, along with a request to reopen case file WA1228 to evaluate the possibility of criminal conduct concealed within the 2008 missing persons case. The internal bulletin clearly listed the time, location, and evidence recovered, with attached photos of the metal box and the note reading, "Lockup 1005. That same afternoon, the cold case unit commander approved the request to reactivate the file. In the Renton storage facility, metal box WA1228 was pulled from the shelf. The faded silver seal that had remained intact for 12 years was broken in the presence of 2 administrative staff and 1 investigator. Inside, the evidence bags and copies of surveillance footage were still intact, the paperwork only slightly yellowed. Retired Lieutenant Thomas Hensley, still living in Kent, was contacted that same day and informed of the new discovery. In the reactivation report, the cold case unit noted new evidence directly related to the Tukwila Group disappearance, containing suspicious elements confirmed by biological evidence matching a former suspect. Case WA1228 is officially reopened for investigation. The storage room that had been silent for over a decade was lit once more as cold case detectives spread out the old photographs and placed them beside images of the newly discovered metal box. The atmosphere, heavy with a mixture of tension and the excitement of a case long thought forgotten, suddenly coming back to life. Immediately after WA 1228 was reactivated, the King County office contacted former Lieutenant Thomas Hensley, the original 2008 case lead, and invited him to return as a consultant for the new investigation team. When he received the call, Hensley had been retired for 8 years and was living quietly in the Kent suburbs, but news of the metal box made refusal impossible. He arrived at the cold case unit office on the first morning of March and stood looking at the familiar documents laid out on the table. Photos of the Harbor Yogurt store, technical area maps, fabric scraps, shoe prints, and now the pictures of the rusted metal box and the words "Lockup 1005. Under his supervision, all the old evidence was removed from storage for re-examination using modern forensic technologies unavailable in 2008. Next-generation sequencing, DNA analysis, scanning electron microscopy of fiber microstructure, and mass spectrometry comparison of oil residues. The team began with Hannah Bryce's remaining hair sample. The degraded root was re-extracted using YSTAR protocols, yielding results with over 99.99% certainty. When compared to dust on the newly recovered metal box, the results were startling. The fine cement residue around the box's rim contained degraded DNA traces belonging to Hannah Bryce herself. This confirmed that the 2020 evidence was directly linked to the missing girls. The fabric fibers from the technical door were also reanalyzed, this time revealing additional gray polyester fibers stained with industrial oil, identical to the type used in the mall's refrigeration and underground electrical systems. The same oil found in 2008. Hensley closely followed each result, taking notes and wondering why this evidence had been buried more than 100 meters away from the yogurt shop under foundation concrete. To answer that question, the team decided to employ 3D crime scene reconstruction technology. Using the original South Center Mall architectural drawings combined with new geological survey data, they built a digital model of the old basement level. The 3D image displayed on the large screen showed that the location where the box was found lay directly beside a service tunnel that connected to the technical area, a tunnel that had been sealed during the 2009 renovation. The model revealed an old ventilation duct running straight from the technical space behind Harbor Yogurt down to the foundation that was later filled with concrete, the exact spot where workers found the box. Based on thermal mapping and ground-penetrating radar images, specialists confirmed an anomalous concrete mass in that area with thickness and composition differing from the mall's original foundation. This meant the concrete had been poured later, outside the original design plans. When cross-referencing renovation timelines, Hensley discovered the sealing work was completed in January 2009, just weeks after the missing persons case was temporarily closed. He stared silently at the rotating model on the screen, then asked the technician to zoom in on the filled tunnel. A section of concrete more than 2 meters thick, located precisely beneath the spot where the mall's electrical system once housed its control station, the only area Ryan Springman had authorized access to. The simulation data was saved in the report under the heading 3D Scene Reconstruction, Suspicious Location in South Center Mall Technical Basement. Forensic experts concluded that the area may have been manually sealed after the disappearance, and the evidence containing the 4 employee badges was hidden inside the ventilation duct as part of that process. Hensley sat deep in thought, gazing at the reconstructed images on the screen, the blue glow reflecting off his aged face. 12 years earlier, he had stood directly above that very spot, unaware that just a few meters beneath the concrete floor might lie the key to the entire mystery of case WA 1228. The new findings from the forensic tests and 3D model led the investigation team to refocus on the one person with access to the technical area at the time of the disappearance, Ryan Springman. Under Hensley's guidance, the King County Sheriff's Office established covert surveillance. Police began collecting behavioral data, residence information, travel patterns, and financial records for Springman. More than a decade after the case was closed, he had left his old maintenance company, was working for a small business in Tacoma, and lived with his wife and 2 children in a quiet suburban neighborhood. On the surface, Springman led a normal life with no criminal record and no departures from Washington state. However, a review of archived financial records from 2008-2009 revealed suspicious transactions. In December 2008, he purchased large quantities of construction materials, pre-mixed cement, gravel, and 2 drums of industrial oil used for generators from a supply store in Kent. These purchases coincided exactly with the disappearance, and the amounts far exceeded normal maintenance needs. Police traced the payment records and confirmed Springman's signature on the orders. Additionally, recovered cell phone location data showed his device active within the South Center Mall radius around 10 p.m. on December 14, 2008. Matching perfectly the disappearance window and the time the electrical system was manually shut down. The investigation team immediately forwarded these findings to the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office to obtain search and arrest warrants. In the court filing, they detailed the circumstantial evidence: Hannah Breese's DNA on the recovered box, Springman's fingerprint on the lockup 1005 note, construction material purchases timed with the incident, and cell data confirming presence in a restricted area. After 2 weeks of review, a King County judge approved the arrest warrant on initial charges of obstruction of justice and negligent homicide. On March 22, 2020, at 6 a.m., the Cold Case Task Force, working with Tacoma police, approached Springman's home in the South Sheridan neighborhood. He was arrested in his backyard as he prepared to leave for work. The arrest was swift and without resistance. When informed of the reason, Springman remained silent, except for one question. After 12 years, why now? He was transported to King County headquarters while forensic teams searched his home and vehicle. In a backyard shed, they seized old construction tools, including paint cans, shovels, and several bags of cement, bearing the same brand as the 2008 receipts. Everything was sealed as additional evidence. An internal King County bulletin sent statewide read, "Suspect Ryan Springman arrested this morning in Tacoma in connection with the 2008 Harbor Yogurt Employee Group disappearance. Case AA-1228 has been officially reclassified from unresolved missing persons to negligent homicide and obstruction of justice." For Hensley, that moment brought a mixture of relief and heaviness. He was in the office with the younger investigators when confirmation of the arrest came over the radio. After 12 years since signing the order to shelve the case, he saw the same name appear at the top of a new report: Ryan Springman. Outside the window, the Seattle sky remained gray with moisture, just as it had been the day he walked away from the scene all those years ago. But this time, Case AA-1228 was no longer a file sleeping in cold storage. At King County headquarters, Ryan Springman was brought into Interrogation Room 3 at 8:45 a.m., just hours after his arrest. The small room was lit by harsh white light, reflecting off the metal table in the center, with 2 cameras in the corners recording everything. Facing him were Lieutenant Thomas Hensley and younger Detective Laura Kendrick. From the very first minute, Springman insisted he had no involvement in the 2008 disappearance and claimed his fingerprint on the lockup 1005 note was merely coincidence because he used to work in that area. When asked about his timeline the night of the incident, Springman repeated his old statement. He arrived at the mall around 8 p.m., checked the electrical system, and left before 10 p.m. Hensley showed no reaction, simply opened the thick case file and laid out the new documents one by one, access card logs showing he logged into the technical system at 9:57 p.m. and logged out at 10:09 p.m. Cement and gravel receipts dated December 17th, the 3D model illustrating the technical tunnel, sealed directly beneath the area he oversaw. Springman read them, remained silent for a long time, then said it was repair work done after I left the company. Hensley requested comparison of the original electrical schematics with the 2008 logs, pointing out that the manually tripped breaker matched the location of the concrete-filled tunnel. When asked who had authority to touch the auxiliary panel, Springman gave an evasive answer that only the chief engineer could, but when reminded that the system logs showed his own ID, he lowered his head and said nothing. After the first 3 hours, the interrogation paused to allow the appointed public defender to join. The next day, the second session took place. This time Hensley focused on the details of sealing the technical area. He showed Springman ground-penetrating radar images and pointed to the thick concrete mass beneath the floor, asking, "Who poured this?" Springman shrugged and said it could have been an outside contractor. When pressed that no such contract appeared in internal records, he began to show tension. His voice slowed, his fingers lightly tapped the table. Hensley noticed the change, applied no further pressure, and simply noted, "Mention of concrete, hesitant reaction, avoids eye contact." On the third day, the session lasted more than 4 hours. When asked to explain why the alarm system was disabled at the same time as the power cutoff, Springman admitted he had turned off the alarm to test the wiring, claiming it was standard maintenance procedure. Hensley showed him the colored electrical diagram, pointing out that the area was a restricted technical safety zone, requiring explicit authorization for any intervention. Springman sat quietly for a long time, then exhaled and said softly, "I remember there was a really bad smell down there, like something burnt or rotting. I just wanted to seal it so no one would complain." When asked what he sealed it with, he answered curtly, "Cement." The response plunged the room into silence. Hensley looked up and stared directly at him. "You personally poured concrete there?" Springman hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I just filled the tunnel opening. I didn't think there was anything down there. I didn't check. I just wanted it done." He said he had poured the cement mixture into the ventilation duct opening because of the smell and didn't want anyone asking questions. When asked if he knew that tunnel once connected to the South Side store area, Springman looked down and quietly answered, "Not sure. Maybe I didn't notice." The fragmented statements were enough to establish a direct link between his actions and the location where the evidence was found. Hensley recorded the statements verbatim, signed the transcript, and stood up. He knew the interrogation had reached its critical point. Springman was no longer denying everything, but his half-confessions opened a terrifying possibility that beneath the concrete he had sealed because of a strange smell might lie the final answer to the 12-year-old disappearance. As he stepped out of the room, Hensley stood motionless, gazing through the frosted glass. Inside, Springman sat with his head bowed, hands clasped, the white light falling on his shoulders and casting a sharp shadow across the room, the fragile boundary between confession and a crime not yet fully named. After 3 days of continuous interrogation with multiple changes in tactics, Ryan Springman finally agreed to provide detailed information about the area he had cemented over on that night in December 2008. In the statement taken on the morning of March 27, 2020, Springman confirmed the location was sub-technical duct 2 in the southern foundation level of the complex, approximately 12 meters from the electrical substation area and nearly 3 meters below the main floor level. He described it as a narrow shaft built in the 1980s to house gas lines and electrical cables, with a small access point located behind the main electrical control room, an area only maintenance personnel knew how to open. According to Springman, on the night of the disappearance, he noticed a burning smell and a strange foul odor coming from the vent opening of the subduct. He brought testing tools, but having no flashlight, could only see pitch-black darkness inside. Springman stated that after shutting off power to the entire facility for inspection, he stood at the duct opening for a few minutes and then decided to seal it because the smell was too unpleasant. When asked how, he said he happened to have a bag of dry cement in his truck, the kind used for patching technical floors, and mixed it with water in a plastic bucket before pouring it down the duct opening until the surface was completely sealed. Springman estimated he used about 2 50-pound bags of cement, along with gravel and moisture-resistant additives, totaling around 80 pounds of material. The process, according to his statement, took 30 to 40 minutes and was completed just before he restored power and left the complex. He said he did not report it to management because he thought it was just an old vent leaking smells. However, when asked why he left the note "Lockup 1005" and 4 employee badges in the iron box, Springman lowered his head and remained silent for nearly a minute before answering that someone might have asked me to hold on to them. Hensley stared at him without speaking and asked him to mark the exact location on the technical blueprint. Springman drew a small red square on the printed map, labeled Subduct 2B, located directly beneath the corridor connecting Harbor Yogurt and the electrical technical area. The mark was verified, signed, and stamped into the record. Immediately afterward, Hensley forwarded the information to the field investigation team and the prosecutor's office to request an excavation warrant. In the affidavit submitted to the King County judge, he stated clearly, the suspect's statement matches architectural data and ground-penetrating radar results. The suspected area was illegally filled with concrete during the time frame coinciding with the disappearance. The excavation warrant was approved on March 29, authorizing the opening of the old technical floor at South Center Mall under forensic supervision. The specialist team prepared a safe construction plan that included core drilling the concrete, shoring the foundation, and installing ventilation to prevent collapse. The area was fully fenced off with temporary barriers and guarded by police around the clock. While awaiting execution, Hensley reviewed Springman's statement once more. He said he couldn't remember the exact date, but was certain the concrete pour happened after the power went out and that no one else was there. When asked why he performed an unauthorized task alone, Springman simply replied, "I felt it needed to be done, to finish it." Those casual words were recorded verbatim in the transcript, placed alongside the duct diagram and technical specifications. Hensley signed the last line and closed the file. Outside, the forensic team had already set up drilling and lighting equipment. According to the plan, excavation would begin as soon as the warrant was executed at the exact spot Springman had marked on the drawing, a place no one had suspected for 12 years might hold the answer to the mysterious disappearance coded WA 1228. On the morning of April 1, 2020, excavation work at the old technical area of South Center Mall began under the supervision of the King County office and the Tacoma forensic team. The site was completely sealed off, surrounded by corrugated metal fencing. Only the special engineering team, forensic specialists, and investigators were allowed in or out. The map marked Subduct 2B was placed on the command table right next to the drilling zone. Hensley was present from early morning, standing beside the lead engineer overseeing the floor opening. The concrete core drill operated slowly, its steel bit grinding inch by inch into the slab that had hardened for over a decade. The low rumbling echoed through the empty space, mixed with the smell of concrete dust and machine oil. After nearly an hour, the drill bit broke through a layer approximately 2 meters thick, creating a round, dark hole. An acoustic probe was lowered and detected a void beneath that was larger than expected. When lights were shone down, reflections off old metal surfaces confirmed this was indeed the sealed technical subduct. Technicians widened the opening using diamond blade saws, then used industrial fans to exhaust dust and fumes. The air inside the duct was heavy, carrying a mix of mold and rust. Once gas detectors confirmed safe levels, the first 2 forensic technicians descended on a portable metal ladder. Below, they found a narrow chamber roughly 4 meters long and less than 2 meters wide, surrounded by concrete walls and covered in thick dust. In the far corner, their flashlight beams stopped on irregularly shaped objects. One technician called up, voice hoarse, "There's something here." Hensley, standing above, gripped the railing tightly as the first camera clicks echoed from below. Under the lights, the scene revealed 4 skeletal remains lying overlapping each other against the wall, most still wearing faded clothing. Nearby on the ground lay an old plastic shell cell phone, buttons, an aluminum necklace, and a pair of women's sneakers. Everything was photographed in positional sequence. Technicians marked the scene with numbered evidence cards, 1 through 4 for the 4 bodies, 5 through 9 for personal items, and 10 for the remaining electrical wiring running along the wall edge. The air in the chamber was thick. Only camera shutters and short coordination commands could be heard. Each bone fragment, piece of fabric, and personal item was carefully collected and sealed in specialized bags. Technicians took DNA samples from teeth and femoral bone tissue while measuring the exact position of each body relative to the opening. A scene sketch was drawn on-site, noting orientation and dimensions: 4.2 meters long, 1.8 meters wide, 1.9 meters high. On the wall surfaces were traces of white powder and brush marks, indicating someone had applied a thin layer of cement before the thick concrete cap was poured above. One technician found a small rusted metal plate in the corner, bearing the inscription, "South Utility Duct, 1983. Hensley peered down from the edge, his face taut. He knew this moment ended 12 years of uncertainty. The entire area was brightly lit as the forensic team recorded final panoramic photos. The remains were brought up one section at a time in gray body bags, each labeled with individual codes, and transferred directly to the forensic van parked outside the mall. Simultaneously, technicians continued collecting samples of concrete dust, industrial oil, and soil residue for timing analysis of the sealing layer. All activities were filmed and documented in detail in the scene report. When excavation was complete, only the empty concrete shell of the subduct remained, cold, damp air rising along with the constant hum of ventilation fans. Hensley signed the scene report with the note, "Discovery of 4 human skeletal remains, likely belonging to the Harbor Yogurt employees missing since December 2008. In the preliminary report, sent to King County, the forensic team temporarily concluded, no signs of violent trauma, skeletal structures intact, no sharp force injuries detected. Primary indicators suggest cause of death was most likely asphyxiation in a confined space. Air samples taken inside the duct also showed high CO fizz levels and severely depleted oxygen, consistent with suffocation. The body bags were neatly arranged in the refrigerated compartment of the forensic van, blue lights flashing as it pulled away. Hensley stood watching until the vehicle disappeared, cold wind blowing across the empty lot and stirring a thin layer of concrete dust over his shoes. Behind the metal fence, people hurried about their workday, unaware that directly beneath their feet, a secret buried for 12 years had just been uncovered. A silent chamber where 4 people had once been trapped in darkness and quietly suffocated, marking the end of the first chapter of Case WA 1228. The evidence collected from the excavation site was transported that same night to the Tacoma Forensic Lab for detailed examination. The specialist team worked around the clock for days, extracting DNA from bones, hair, and any remaining tissue under cold storage conditions. The first sample was compared against Washington State's missing persons database and produced a perfect match with Hannah Bryce's DNA, previously identified from hair evidence recovered during the 2008 investigation. The remaining 3 samples matched Allison Merrick, Rachel Sloan, and Emily Carter, ending 12 years of waiting for identification of the 4 bodies. DNA matching was faster than expected, thanks to next-generation sequencing, which allowed reconstruction of genetic profiles from heavily degraded bone. Results were independently verified by 2 laboratories, eliminating any possibility of error. The DNA report sent to King County on April 8, 2020, stated clearly, genetic sequences from samples 1-4 correspond 100% to records under case number WA 1228, the 4 victims who disappeared from South Center Mall in December 2008. In addition to identification, the materials team completed analysis of concrete samples taken from the duct sealing layer. Under microscopy, the samples revealed the presence of moisture-resistant additives and a cement-gravel-sand ratio characteristic of ready-mix type C, a product commonly used for technical maintenance and sold at building supply stores around Kent. When cross-referenced with Ryan Springman's purchase receipt from Evergreen Supply dated December 17, 2008, the match was exact same cement brand, same additive code, same mixing ratio. Notably, the excavated concrete contained faint green particles of Hydroseal anti-mold agent, a less common product sold only at the exact store Springman had used. The materials report concluded, probability greater than 95%, that the duct sealing concrete originated from the same product and supplier listed on the suspect's receipt. Additionally, chemical analysis detected traces of iron oxide from a handheld mixing paddle, the type of small mixer Springman had checked out from the maintenance company during the week of the incident. Testing also revealed a clear age difference between the original floor concrete and the newer sealing layer, aligning perfectly with the date the missing person's case was temporarily closed. When all analytical results were combined, the team reconstructed the crime scene formation process. The technical duct was manually sealed with hand-mixed cement and capped with a 2-meter-thick concrete pour, indicating deliberate action. The final 80-plus page Tacoma forensic report, compiling DNA, materials, and scene analysis, was delivered to the King County Sheriff's Office and Pierce County Prosecutor on April 10, 2020. In its conclusion, the specialist wrote, "The combination of biological and materials evidence proves the sealing of the sub-technical duct was neither a technical accident nor routine maintenance. It was an intentional act performed after the 4 victims' deaths to conceal the bodies in a confined space and erase all external traces." The report also confirmed no signs of direct violence, supporting the theory that the victims died of asphyxiation while trapped, after which the area was sealed with concrete. Reading the summary, Hensley felt silence settle over the small meeting room. 12 years earlier, he had suspected the power outage and alarm disablement were calculated actions. Now the evidence confirmed it. In the internal summary memo, he wrote in black ink on the final line, "Concealment of bodies was deliberate. All physical evidence, timing, materials, and personnel align. Conclusion: evidence destruction occurred after the deaths of the 4 WA 1,228 victims." On April 15, 2020, after receiving the complete forensic results from Tacoma, the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office formally announced charges against Ryan Springman. Based on the investigation file and forensic analyses, Chief Prosecutor Margaret Foley declared Springman was being charged with 4 counts of negligent homicide, 1 for each victim: Allison Merrick, Rachel Sloan, Hannah Bryce, and Emily Carter, plus 1 count of obstruction of justice for concealing the bodies and destroying evidence at the scene. In the over 60-page indictment, Foley listed 59 pieces of physical evidence, 28 witness statements, and 4 forensic reports as the basis for the charges. Key evidence included DNA matches to the 4 victims' remains, concrete samples matching the materials Springman purchased in December 2008, his fingerprints on the lockup 1005 note, and his own admission of pouring cement to seal the area that smelled. Prosecutors argued that Springman, as an electrical maintenance employee with access to the technical areas, had negligently or intentionally caused the 4 women to become trapped in the subduct during a power-down inspection, then, instead of rescuing them or reporting the incident, concealed the event by sealing the duct with concrete to avoid detection. Foley described the actions as negligence that led to tragedy and stressed that although there was no direct evidence he caused their deaths, sealing the duct without first checking inside constituted grossly negligent conduct with fatal consequences. During trial preparation, the court-appointed defense team initially attempted to argue Springman acted in panic after smelling what he thought was a gas leak, but prosecutors countered that no technical reports showed any leak that day, and Springman's subsequent actions, disabling cameras, neutralizing alarms, and cleaning his truck, all demonstrated full awareness of what he was doing. At the preliminary hearing, when asked if he understood the charges and maximum penalties, Springman quietly answered, "Yes, ma'am." The weight of evidence forced the defense to propose a plea deal to reduce sentencing. After 2 weeks of negotiation, prosecutors agreed to drop any intentional homicide charges and keep the 4 counts of negligent homicide plus 1 count of obstruction of justice in exchange for Springman's full admission of his actions, detailed description of the sealing process, and waiver of appeal rights. On April 27, Springman appeared in Pierce County Superior Court, wearing an orange jumpsuit, face gaunt, hands clasped in front of him. When asked if he pleaded guilty under the agreement, he nodded and said hoarsely, "I accept responsibility for what happened." The court immediately accepted the plea and scheduled formal sentencing for the following month. In the press release, Prosecutor Foley stated, "After 12 years, we finally have answers to what seemed an unsolvable disappearance. The evidence shows the defendant acted negligently and deliberately concealed his mistake, resulting in the tragic deaths of 4 young women." That same day, the entire case file was digitized and entered into Washington State's criminal database, marking the transition from investigation to criminal prosecution. Hensley, still following the case as a consultant, was present in the courtroom when the indictment was read. He quietly wrote a few short lines in his notebook: 59 pieces of evidence, 28 statements, 4 forensic reports. 12 years in a circle, finally back to the starting point, where he turned off the lights and left them in the dark. The trial of Ryan Springman took place publicly on the morning of May 19, 2020, at the Pierce County Courthouse in Tacoma, drawing a large crowd of reporters and local residents. This was a case of special interest not only because it had dragged on for 12 years, but also because of the forensic details considered exemplary of advances in criminal investigation technology in the state of Washington. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution table was piled high with documents, crime scene photos, and large format prints of forensic exhibits lined up along both walls. In the public gallery behind them sat the victims' families, faces deeply etched by time, yet still holding the same restrained gaze. Springman was led into the courtroom in an orange jail jumpsuit, handcuffed, and seated between 2 security officers. When presiding Judge Douglas Renner entered, the entire room rose. After the opening formalities concluded, lead prosecutor Margaret Foley began her presentation by reconstructing the entire investigation timeline. She recounted the 2008 disappearance, the 2020 discovery of the metal box during a construction project, and the chain of forensic evidence that led to the excavation of the sealed utility crawl space. One by one, crime scene photos were projected on the large screen: the concrete slab that had been cut and drilled, the narrow crawl space, 4 overlapping skeletons, the scrap of paper reading "Lockup 1005", and the sealed evidence bags. Foley read aloud key passages from the forensic reports, emphasizing that everything pointed to Springman's actions being deliberate: cutting the power, disabling the alarm, and sealing off the utility area, resulting in the deaths of 4 people and years of concealment. She stated firmly, "They did not die by accident. They died because of one man's indifference and fear." Defense attorney Alan Drexler did not challenge the authenticity of the evidence. He only asked the court to consider the defendant's circumstances, arguing that he had acted in panic and without intent to kill. Drexler read from Springman's statement in the record, "I didn't know anyone was in there, I just wanted to stop the smell." But that argument was not enough to change the nature of the case. When given permission to speak, Springman stood, his voice hoarse, and said briefly that he accepted full responsibility and hoped the girls' families could find peace. No one in the room responded. There was only the scratch of pens on the court reporter's notepad. Judge Renner delivered a ruling that lasted more than half an hour, stressing the exceptionally serious nature of obstructing justice and prolonging the victims' families' pain for over a decade. He said, "Although there is no evidence the defendant intended to kill, his actions deprived them of any chance to live and buried the truth in silence. Justice was delayed for 12 years, but it was not forgotten." After the judicial panel voted, the sentence was pronounced: 15 years imprisonment for 4 counts of negligent homicide and 1 count of obstruction of justice, plus 3 years of supervised probation upon release. Springman bowed his head without a word, hands clasped tightly. Prosecutor Foley requested a special notation in the file, "Case closed, solved, 2020." All documents, photographs, and physical evidence were archived according to standard procedure for resolved criminal cases. As the clerk read the final line of the judgment, the atmosphere in the courtroom remained heavy, as if everyone were hearing an indictment against time itself. The victims' families sat silently. No one cried, only their eyes fixed forward, where Springman was being escorted out. Hensley was seated in the back row, quietly adding one last line to his old notebook. "Justice doesn't bring back the past, but at least it makes it stop being silent." As the trial ended, afternoon light streamed through the high windows onto the cold tile floor, and with the official entry in the King County system, "Case closed, solved, 2020." The WA 1228 file was closed, after a 12-year search for the truth. After the sentence was handed down, and case file BO2A 1228 was officially closed at the Tacoma courthouse, the King County Sheriff's Office began compiling the final report, an internal document used to review the entire 12-plus-year investigation. Under the direction of Cold Case Unit Chief Ellen Torres, the Special Investigation Team gathered all data from the 2008 phase, including initial reports, security camera logs, forensic reports, interrogation transcripts, and the 2020 court judgment. The final summary, over 200 pages thick, was completed by late July 2020 and opened with the note, "Harbor Yogurt Group Disappearance. Case number WA 1228, investigation complete. Case closed." In the opening section, the team provided a comprehensive evaluation of early-stage errors, the delayed processing of the scene, the failure to expand the search into the utility areas, and the assumption that the power outage was merely a technical malfunction, all of which caused the opportunity for early discovery to be missed. The report stated clearly that if in 2008 the utility crawl space had been checked with ground-penetrating equipment, or even simply by removing the technical flooring to investigate the strange odor, the case could have been resolved decades earlier. The next section analyzed the value of long-term evidence preservation. The fact that hair, fiber, and fabric samples had remained sealed and undisturbed in the Renton storage facility for 12 years allowed new generation DNA technology to produce matches and reopen the case. The report acknowledged the contribution of the cold case technicians who maintained periodic inventory procedures even though the file had been classified. No indication of criminal activity. A separate chapter evaluated the role of technology, particularly 3D modeling and material analysis, in reconstructing the scene and locating the sealed crawl space. The conclusion stated, "Technological progress only matters when paired with discipline in storage and human perseverance." The report also devoted many pages to recognizing the contributions of Lieutenant Thomas Hensley, who had followed the case from day one and was the first to note the possibility of concealment beneath the technical floor. He was cited as a model of persistent investigation and respect for evidence. In early August, during an internal meeting at King County headquarters, the final report was officially released and archived with the Washington State Patrol. A copy was sent to the Pierce County Police Academy as teaching material on procedures for handling complex missing persons cases. The case exhibits, including fabric scraps, hair samples, fibers, shoe prints, concrete samples, and forensic photos, were sealed one last time, recoded WA 1228C, and returned to the King County Cold Case Storage Facility. Shelf 27, the same spot they had occupied for a decade. Before closing the metal box lid, the head of forensics signed off on the condition of the evidence and affixed a sticker reading, "Final, Closed, 2020." The electronic case file was entered into the National NCIC database with the status fully resolved. A short summary was posted publicly on the King County portal, announcing that the Harbor Yogurt employee's disappearance had been solved thanks to modern forensic technology and interagency cooperation. Outside, Hensley, now only an honorary consultant, was invited to attend the results announcement meeting. He received a printed copy of the report, flipped to the last page, and read the small print note, Operational lesson: no scene is ever truly clean. Only evidence that hasn't been seen yet. The room fell silent for a moment as the report was signed off. After 12 years, File W-1228, once just a line on the missing persons list, had become a model document for the entire Washington state cold case system. Permanently stored in the King County Evidence Vault as proof of the value of perseverance and the belief that justice, however late, can still be served. The final summary of File W-1228 was completed and signed off in September 2020, closing one of the longest-running investigations in King County history. In its conclusion, the Cold Case Unit report clearly listed the key operational lessons drawn from the entire process. First, scene processing in group disappearances must treat every anomaly, power outages, changes to technical systems, or unusual odors as potential indicators of criminal activity and never be dismissed without direct evidence. Second, comprehensive checks of utility spaces, basements, and piping in commercial facilities, which are often considered harmless but can be locations where crimes occur or are concealed. The oversight of the South Center Mall utility crawl space was regarded as a strategic error that delayed justice for 12 years. Third, the report stressed the importance of long-term preservation of biological evidence and reanalysis using new DNA technology. Tiny items such as hair, fibers, or scraps of paper, when stored to standard, can become the key to cracking seemingly hopeless cases. YSDR technology and next-generation sequencing proved their worth in recovering information from degraded evidence. In the operational overview section, the report proposed establishing standardized interagency protocols among field officers, forensics, and infrastructure technicians to share data immediately in disappearances at commercial or industrial sites. In particular, security camera, electrical, and ventilation systems should be checked simultaneously to detect human tampering as early as possible. The Washington State Patrol later used case WA-1228 as a classic example in new officer training under the title Forensic Patience: The Power of Time and Preserved Evidence. The accompanying summary emphasized justice is not achieved only through sharpness at the scene, but through persistent systematic process and respect for even the smallest trace. At the year-end internal conference, Lieutenant Thomas Hensley, now an honorary consultant, was invited to address the young officers. He said simply, "No case is ever truly closed as long as someone still remembers it, and no evidence is useless if it's properly preserved." That statement was later quoted in King County training materials as a professional motto. At the very end of the file, the closing line was printed in bold: "Justice was served after 12 years thanks to evidence preservation, advances in forensic technology, and the continuous effort of investigators." Below it were the certifying signatures of Cold Case Chief Ellen Torres, Chief Prosecutor Margaret Foley, and Consultant Thomas Hensley. On October 2, 2020, File WA-1228 was permanently sealed and returned to the King County Cold Case Vault, Shelf 27, the same place it had quietly occupied for the 12 years before it was reopened. In the electronic storage system, the case status displayed one final line: "Closed, solved, 2020." And so the journey to uncover the truth about the South Center Mall disappearance came to a complete end, leaving not only justice for the 4 victims, but also a profound lesson for the investigative profession. That time may blur memories, but it cannot erase what is preserved through evidence and faith in justice. The story of the 2008 Washington cold case solved is not only a criminal tragedy resolved after 12 years, it also deeply reflects the core values of American society today, where justice, accountability, and trust in science remain the foundation of civil community. Details in the story, such as Lieutenant Thomas Hensley's persistent preservation of every sample or the cold case unit's continued inventory of File WA-1228 for over a decade, demonstrate the meaning of perseverance and discipline in a modern legal system. If initial mistakes in 2008 caused the scene to be overlooked, then by 2020, it was precisely the respect for evidence and the application of new generation forensic technology that restored justice. This reminds Americans today that in an increasingly hurried and turbulent society, care and honesty in every action, no matter how small, can still make a lasting difference. Ryan Springman was not an evil person who intended to kill. He is a symbol of irresponsibility, of the just-get-it-done attitude, and that very attitude destroyed the lives of 4 others. This story reminds us that in work, professional ethics, or community management, carelessness and avoidance of responsibility can have far more serious consequences than deliberate mistakes. The lesson from File WA 1228 is not only for the investigative field, but for American society as a whole. Justice does not come on its own. It is sustained by people, by professional discipline, and by the belief that the truth, no matter how long it has been buried, still needs to be found. Thank you for following to the end of the story, where justice finally spoke after 12 years of silence. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next investigation journeys, where the truth is always unearthed from the darkness.